Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this, the fourth installment of our Holy Week mini-series, also known as Black Saturday. Sometimes it's called Good Saturday or Holy Saturday, but I think the most interesting name is Black Saturday, and that's because it's traditionally a day associated with pain, with despair, and hopelessness. And I know that's an incredible trailer for a video, but please stay with me. I promise it'll be worth it. And if you're anything like me, I know the temptation is to think despair on a Saturday. I mean, living for the weekend, how can that be a day of despair? But you have to remember where the disciples are at this point and see it from their perspective. At this juncture, they're holed up, locked up in a room, and fearing for their lives, right? Because as far as they know, the Romans or the Jews may decide just to finish this whole Jesus movement out in one fell swoop. It may come for them just like they had for Jesus. And you got to see it from their perspective. They had just lost everything they had built their lives on over the last few years, right? They had expected that Jesus was going to come, that he was going to reinstitute the monarchy in Israel, that in all likelihood he would overthrow the Roman government, he would restore justice and restore them and their people to their rightful place, and that he was going to bring that kind of happy ending that all of humanity had been waiting for. And then he died, right? And their future had just crumbled before them because they had left their businesses. They'd spent time away from their families. They had forsaken so much just to come and follow him day in and day out for these several years. And then he died. And that in and of itself had to be confusing, right? I mean, in Mark chapter 8, Peter makes a confession and says, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And you got to think, they had seen him multiply food to feed, multitudes, and thousands upon thousands. They had seen him walk on water. They had seen him calm the storms. The thunder and the lightning quivered at his voice. They had seen the demons and the monsters of hell tremble before him and beg for his mercy. And yet a couple of Roman thugs had just come and beat him up and nailed him to a tree without him so much as lifting a hand or raising his voice to them. What was that about, right? Why? Where was God in all of this? And it had to feel like, at least for those who were there to hear him, that Jesus' statement on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" had to apply to them just as well. Where was God in all of this? Why had he abandoned them? Right? This had to be one of the darkest, lowest points in each of their lives. And yet what they couldn't see, what they didn't have the right perspective to be able to see, was that this valley was the low point between the two highest points in human history. And that even though it felt low and dark and alone now, God was very much at work and was doing something incredible, and they were just in the middle of it and couldn't see it yet. He had not abandoned them. He was not gone. He was still working in a way that was going to blow their minds, and their Lord was going to be waiting for them just around the corner in a way they couldn't ever imagine. But they couldn't see it yet because this was Saturday and they were still in the darkness. And it's easy to pick on the disciples, right? But if we're honest, most of us have been there. If you've been a Christian for any amount of time, you have been through the dark days, right? You've had some Black Saturdays of your own. There are times when life just doesn't make sense, and that doesn't necessarily change just because you become a Christian. There are still times when God feels 1,000 miles away. There are times when you pray with all of your heart and it doesn't feel like it goes past the ceiling. There are times when you just feel so completely, utterly alone, where just like these disciples, you're in the middle of a valley and you can't possibly see how God could do anything with this or be at work. And now in the time of coronavirus, this maybe is more than ever. You have folks who are being laid off, who are losing their jobs, folks who are just trying to keep their businesses open, trying to hold on to their homes. We got folks who are worried about their health or the health of the people nearest and dearest to them, and they're in some dark places. But we got to remember that just like the disciples, we're probably right in the middle of a valley between 2 points of what God is doing, and that he is still every bit as present as he has been on those mountaintops, and that he will show up. And this season may take a while. It may last more than one Saturday. It may last for a season of our life, but he will show up, and he is still there, and he is still present. When I was a teenager, we would go to church camp every summer and have a ton of fun activities, but our directors usually also incorporated some sort of educational time in there as well. We did a lot of different fun activities and field trips. I can remember going to a glass factory and different historical sites. One year, I can remember the director arranged for a potter to come and to speak at our camp, and he came and set up his wheel, and he did an exhibition, and he was a believer, so he relayed how his work as a potter, corresponded to the Christian life. And he was an eccentric individual, I remember that, but a lot of what he said resonated with me and has stuck with me over 20 years now. And I can remember particularly in this one area, as he was molding this kind of thing that looked like a bowl or a vase or something, I can remember to get it moving and going and to be able to shape it into what he wanted it to be, he added a ton of water to it, right? Just a lot of water, and that water made it so supple, it made it so flexible and malleable, and he could just mold it and shape it and turn it into anything that he wanted. And as it was on the wheel, it just responded to his touch so easily, right? And that's like a lot of us. When we first become believers or other mountaintop experiences in our life, we are just so inundated and full of the Spirit and the warmth and the love and the light that he brings, and we're just so moldable, and we can feel God's hands all over us, molding us and shaping us, and whatever comes our way, it doesn't matter, because he is molding us, and we're good, and everything is just flowing the way that it's supposed to be. The thing was, there was a problem. See, the same thing that gave that strength, that water, was also a weakness, because just as it would respond to his hands, anytime you touched it or did anything to it, it would respond. And so you couldn't pick it up or use it for anything. You couldn't put anything inside of it because it wasn't strong enough. And if you left it alone by itself without constantly keeping your hands on it, it would just, right? And so I can remember he had to take a piece of plastic and scrape along the outside edges, and the water would just come off right out of it, right? He would scrape the water off and shake it off and scrape it some more. And then he talked about how he would have to take it from there and put it into the kiln or the fire and bake it so all that excess moisture would come out. And that's what would give it strength, was going through the fire like that. And so it would be able to stand on its own. And only then, when it had that strength to stand, could he put something into it, could he use it, would it actually be good for anything. Only after it had been through the fire. And it's the same way with us, right? We have all had seasons where it felt like God was gone. It felt like we had that Spirit removed from us, and we remember what it was like when we first became a Christian. We remember what it was like on the mountaintop, and now it doesn't feel like that at all. We feel dry, we feel empty, we feel alone, and even put into the furnace sometimes. We feel the heat, we feel the fire, and we think, where is God? Why is he not with me anymore? But the thing is, he is every bit as present in those times. Just like the potter was every bit as present with that clay, even in the kiln and the fire, as he was with the water, right? He is still at work, and maybe even more at work with it, making it into something beautiful and strong and something useful. And it's the same way with God. Even in the midst of these troubled times, in the midst of your own personal Black Saturdays, in the midst of your fires, he is using those for his glory, to shape you into something useful and something good and something beautiful that he can use for himself and for the good of his kingdom, right? You've just got to trust him. You've just got to hang in there and continue to have faith, even when the Saturday is black, even when it's dark, even when you're in the valley, even when the water's being removed, even when you're in the kiln and the fire. That's when faith matters most. that's when you have to trust Him. And above all, that's when you have to remember Sunday's coming.